Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be talking about this case out of, I believe it's pronounced Decatur, Alabama. This is a shooting that happened last year. I believe it was in September. This one is in the news recently because some body camera footage and surveillance footage has finally been released in this case. If you're not familiar with it, well, that's what we're going to do today. This is the case of Officer Bailey Marquette, is the white guy in the middle of the screen here, in the shooting death of Stephen Perkins. This is an incident that occurred as a result of Mr. Perkins's vehicle being repossessed. He came out with a firearm pointed at the guy that was trying to repossess his vehicle. Ultimately, officers ended up responding, shooting and killing Mr. Perkins. There's a lot of interesting things about this, from the fact of some of the lies that are being told in the public. We'll go over that in a moment. There's also some questionable decisions being made by all parties involved in this case. And one of the reasons that I like to go over videos like this or incidents like this is because at the end of the day, a lot of losses of life that occur at the hands of police are avoidable. And what I want to do is avoid unnecessary loss of life. Sometimes the police and a police officer's poor decision or inaccuracies or just a mistake by the police officer is what leads to a loss of life by a citizen, or the loss of a citizen's life. Sometimes the police officer does everything right and the citizen does everything wrong, and that causes his death. This is a case where there were mistakes made by all, and now it's up to the courts to kind of sort out if this was a legally justified use of force or not. And in this case, Officer Bailey Marquette has actually been arrested and charged with murder. So getting into it, and I guess personally, before I get too far into this, I want to give a shout out to my buddy over at, his name is Dan, over at Police Law News. He has a Facebook and an Instagram account. He does an exceptional job of putting out information on police-involved shootings and misinformation and stuff in the media. He also has a Substack, the Police Law Newsletter. If you go to his Instagram and Facebook, you can follow links to those as well. And on his Substack, he put out an article recently, and that's where I got the majority of this information. He breaks it down really well. I agree almost wholeheartedly with pretty much everything that he had to say. And you know, we're going to kind of use that as a jumping off point for this video breakdown. The first thing that I did mention, and I think it's worth mentioning, is some lies and manipulation being done by the media in cases like this. And I've got an example that I'm going to actually play for you here in just a moment. I've got this news clip. I'll pull it up. This news clip right here, this is from a local Alabama news station as far as I'm concerned. They're going to play a protest that is done in honor of Stephen Perkins' life or his memory, whatever. And one of the things that you're going to hear in this broadcast is kind of like a hands up, don't shoot moment. When incidents like this happen, one of the first things that spreads in the public is actually a lie about what happened in this incident. And in this case, you're going to have protesters and attorneys and lawyers and activists come out and say Mr. Perkins was shot by the police because he was black. He wasn't doing anything wrong. They accused him of having a firearm, but it wasn't a firearm. It was just a flashlight. We're going to play that part of the video right now.
We begin our 6 o'clock hour in Decatur, where large crowds continue together demanding action from the city.
Yeah, this after Decatur police shot and killed Stephen Perkins. This happened a week ago today. Police say he pointed a gun at them, and that's why they fired. 48's Sean Dowling has reaction this morning, including an exclusive interview with Decatur's mayor and what the Perkins family attorney is saying about the case. Sean.
Well, attorney Lee Merritt says he hasn't seen a crowd quite like this one since George Floyd was killed back in 2020 in Minneapolis. But back here in the Valley, this was the scene at Decatur City Hall. Hundreds of people coming out to honor Perkins and to demand justice. They also came out armed with flashlights. Decatur police officials say Perkins had a gun on him, but his family says he only had a flashlight.
Alrighty, so what they said was partially true. This is the way Snopes would define their argument, that he was holding a flashlight. That is partially true. He was holding a flashlight, and I'll make myself a little bit smaller so you can see the flashlight better. It just so happens that the flashlight he was holding was attached to what appears to be a 9mm Glock pistol. So the protesters that are out protesting, holding flashlights, similar to other ones where we've seen people holding bottles of tea or wearing hoodies and all that, they are drastically misrepresenting the facts that occurred in this case. And if you ask me, it's kind of disgusting. So let's get into the actual case, and then we're going to watch some of the body camera footage and go from there. So the first thing that I want to go over when I'm talking about this is kind of the course of events that happened that night. And this is this is actually a still shot from a video that was released by the state of Alabama, like their criminal investigation division, I guess is what you're going to call it, like the FBI for the state. Every state has them. Ohio has BCI, and everyone's state names it something different. They were called in to investigate this shooting, and here's the information that they put out regarding this shooting. It says, in the early morning hours of September 29, 2023, Caleb Combs, a record driver, I call him a repo driver, for All-Star Recovery, attempted an authorized vehicle repossession from Stephen Perkins at 3931 Ryan Drive in Decatur, Alabama. During the first recovery attempt, Perkins reportedly brandished a handgun at Combs, which caused Combs to abort the recovery attempt and leave the residence. Combs then called Decatur Police Department and reported Perkins' actions. After filing a police report, Combs asked DPD officers, Decatur Police Department, I'm assuming, to accompany him back to Perkins' residence for safety while he repossessed the vehicle. The following is Combs' call to Decatur. Okay, I'm not going to play the 911 call, but he did in fact call 911. He called the police department. He said, "Hey, I'm a repo guy. I was out repossessing a vehicle. While doing so, the guy who I'm assuming owns the vehicle came out with a gun, threatened to kill me. So I left. I want to make a report for the threats. And now that I've made this report, I would still like to go do my job and recover the vehicle. Can you come with me to make sure that I don't get shot while I'm recovering the vehicle?" The police agreed to do so. And what you're going to see next is going to actually be the body camera footage of one of the officers who can very clearly, from his camera's perspective, you can see the shooting incident very, very well. I will tell you that you're going to watch an officer-involved shooting video in just a moment. I have edited this video for sound so you don't hear the gunshots. The images of the person's body are going to be blurred out, so this will be heavily censored, although you'll still be able to clearly tell what happened in this video. I also want to make you aware that it happens very fast, so make sure you watch closely. I'm going to play that video for you right now.
You got one coming to the door. Hey, I got him covered. I got covered.
All right, that was the entire incident. Now, some thoughts on what happened there, and my thoughts, feelings, and this is where things start to get questionable on both sides, right? And when I saw this original post on Police Law News' Facebook page, I made a comment. Pretty sure it was Facebook. It might have been Instagram. I can't quite remember. But my comment was as such, interestingly enough, when it comes to repossessing vehicles, the department that I work for has a policy specifically preventing us from responding to calls like this. If this was my police department and this was me responding to this call with my friends, if a repo guy calls in and says, "Hey, I went to repossess this vehicle, guy came out with a gun and threatened to kill me, I want to file a police report, I want to press charges, I want to do all those things," we would meet him wherever he is, as long as he's not at that house anymore. If he was still there, we would tell him to leave, because obviously if you're being threatened, If you don't feel safe, you should leave. You shouldn't be sticking around in a place where people are threatening you, right? We would meet with him. We would take a report. If there was any corroborating evidence, something that would give me a probable cause to go ahead and file charges, something other than just maybe his word alone, we could go ahead and file charges. Like if he had a witness or he had body camera or like dash camera on his truck or something like that, then we could go ahead and file charges. If he knew the person's name, I would probably just take the report and refer him to the prosecutor's office, and that would be it. If he didn't know the person's name and we had time, and we thought that it was a credible threat, and we thought that we actually had a dangerous person out there with a firearm that was threatening to shoot and kill people, we would probably respond to this guy's address. We'd respond to Mr. Perkins' house, and we would knock on the door and try to talk to him. We would either try to talk to him, or we would file a warrant, go back and arrest him. Like, these are the things that we would do. One thing that we would not do is we would not go to the house and just stand by while he repossesses the car. One of the reasons for that is because this is a civil action. When you take out a vehicle loan, you are filing a civil filing. You are signing a civil contract between you, the bank, the dealership, whoever it is. You're agreeing to pay some money back, and they're agreeing to let you borrow that car until the loan's paid off, and then it is yours. If you don't make your payments, they can come and repossess that vehicle and hold it hostage until you've paid them. And if you don't pay them, then they can sell the vehicle, and there's a process for that. But that whole thing is a civil process. That is not a criminal process. I, as a police officer, cannot verify if you've been making your payments appropriately or doing any of those things. Therefore, I am not going to act under the color of law as a police officer, a law enforcement officer. I'm not going to, under the color of law, help a private company repossess your vehicle. This is a matter that I don't have any authority in. I don't have any power here, as the Lord of the Rings thing says. So I am not going to get involved. The absolute most that we would be willing to do would be to stand by for safety, which is what this guy asked to do. But what these officers are doing here, this is not standing by for safety. They're effectively setting up an ambush for the guy in the house. They're hiding behind vehicles. The guy's going to come out of his house and he has no idea that the police are there. One of your jobs as a police officer is to de-escalate situations. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on in the media and by activists and this and that, talking about what it is that police officers do to de-escalate a situation. What's de-escalation? What's not de-escalation? I am here to tell you that officer presence alone is de-escalation. So one thing that you might do in a situation like this, and this is something that we would do not for a repo, but let's say we had a woman who feared that she was going to be beaten or attacked by her husband, and she comes and says, hey, and let's say that he never articulated a threat. Let's say a woman comes to me and says, I've been cheating on my husband. He just found out. I know he's mad. I'm afraid if I go to the house, he's going to beat me. I just need to go get my car out of the driveway, and I'm going to leave for a couple of days, and then hopefully we can talk about it. That's a situation where we're like, yeah, sure. For your own safety, even though you screwed up, we'll go and stand by. One of the things that we might do, and I was talking to one of my friends about this yesterday, is we'd actually go park directly in front of the house. Park directly in front of the house so that the guy in the house knows that the police are there. I would make myself very visible. When he comes out the door, I'm going to shine a flashlight at him, say, hey, it's the police. Hold on. What are you doing? That's kind of a similar approach that should have been done in this case. But instead, we have officers that are hiding behind vehicles so that they cannot be seen. And that's when you have the vehicle owner come out. He's right here. And I think there's a good still image. You can see the flashlight on his gun. There was one good still image that I can put up. You know what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put it up in the screen behind me. That clearly shows his gun, the light on his gun. He's clearly pointing a gun at the tow truck driver. Now we have a situation where, sure, the officers didn't do the right thing civilly. They should have made themselves known. They should have done something to prevent this from happening. They should have told the tow truck driver, try to come back on another day. But regardless of that, now you have a guy coming out with a gun to prevent his vehicle from being repossessed. He's threatening deadly force against a person for something that you cannot threaten a person with deadly force about. Now you actually have an officer, and Officer Bailey Marquette is actually right back here on the other side of the tow truck, and that firearm is being pointed at him. As a police officer, well, let me back up for a moment. As anybody, as a private citizen, if you're just out doing your job, something that you are, you're allowed to do by law, you're not breaking the law, you're not doing anything illegal, and somebody points a firearm at you, as a private citizen, if you are armed, you can respond with deadly force. You don't need to put up with somebody pointing a gun at you. So in this case, the tow truck driver, if he had a firearm on him, he would have been justified in using deadly force against Mr. Perkins in this instance. Now, the fact that there's a police officer standing next to the tow truck driver, that doesn't change that. You still have a homeowner coming out with a firearm, pointing it at a private citizen and at a police officer. A police officer's appropriate response to that is to respond with deadly force, and that's what the police officers did. So, my initial findings of this particular case is that the police officers didn't do everything right. They should have used better judgment when they responded to this call and found a way to de-escalate this situation. They shouldn't have kind of waited in ambush for this guy to come out with a gun. At the same time, they're not the ones responsible for Mr. Perkins walking out of his house and pointing a firearm at the repo officer or the repo guy and at the officers. So their response to being presented with deadly force is to return with deadly force. That response is also appropriate. So my initial kind of feelings about this incident are that this is a reasonable use of force. Officer Marquette should not be charged out of this. It's unfortunate. It's sad. It is what it is. After watching the video a little bit longer, I'm starting to believe that perhaps Officer Marquette might have something to be concerned about. And the thing that he has to be concerned about is that when you present deadly force, you're presenting deadly force in order to stop the threat. You have a threat, deadly force, stop the threat. If that means somebody's pointing a gun at you, you shoot at them until they drop the gun and they're no longer a threat and they're no longer able to harm you. In the video, and I'm not going to slow this down, I'm going to play it again in real time. But what I have done in the video clip that you're going to see next is actually a clip of, it's a still shot. So first you're going to see a still shot with Mr. Perkins out here holding the gun. And then you're going to hear the actual gunshots that were fired. Then you're going to see a still shot of the moment that Mr. Perkins dropped the gun. And after he dropped the gun, you're going to hear a large volley of fire. This is a situation where I believe that Officer Marquette is starting to get into a world where he might have something to be concerned about. Let's play that now. All right, so here is a situation where it might change things a little bit. Now, also, this still bears on, or the thing that you have to bear in mind is that this is still from the officer's perspective. We haven't seen the officer's body camera. We don't know what the officer saw in the circumstances, but I do understand why charges were filed in this case now. I believe that the reason charges were filed in this case is because Officer Marquette was initially justified in using deadly force against Mr. Perkins. The reason, I already went over the reasons why he was justified. Once Mr. Perkins was on the ground and was no longer in possession of the firearm, I believe that he was no longer a threat, and that calls into question the continuation of firing rounds. I think the officers probably carry a 9mm, and they can carry 17 to 19 rounds in those firearms. I think he emptied his entire mag on him. Now, this part of the video, you actually, I don't believe this is Marquette. I think it's another officer or deputy, but Marquette can still be heard yelling, shots fired, drop the gun, drop the gun. At this point in time, in his mind, he still believes that Perkins has the firearm, but he clearly doesn't. Mr. Perkins is laying with his head in that direction, away from the firearm. and the firearm is over here near his feet. That's when the other officers that are watching are saying, hey, I've got him, I got him, I got him. They move in, they handcuff him. Unfortunately, Mr. Perkins passed away later. Now, like I said, this is the part where I believe that Officer Marquette, I'm sorry if he's a deputy, I can't remember, has reason to be concerned legally. I believe that this is the part of the story that the prosecution is going to hammer and try to convince the jury that he fired more shots than were necessary to stop the threat, because Mr. Perkins was no longer a threat when he dropped the firearm. The job of the defense in this case, or Officer Marquette's defense in this case, is going to be to prove to the jury that Officer Marquette believed and had reason to believe that Mr. Perkins was still holding the firearm while he continued to fire. It's possible that due to Mr. Perkins's actions, even though Officer Marquette could not see the firearm, that he still believed he was trying to get in position to point the gun at him. I don't really know. But those are my overall thoughts on this. So just in quick recap, repo guy responds to a house, homeowner comes out, points a gun at him, and threatens to shoot him. You can't do that. Perkins could have been arrested for that initial crime. Officers respond to scene. Perkins comes out again, points a gun at the repo guy. Officers are on scene. They defend the repo guy using deadly force, which is appropriate in this case. Then you have the continued volley of fire after that. Part of the use of force, I'm not quite sure is justified. It's not for me to decide. That is up for the jury to decide. And it is based solely on the perspective of Officer Marquette at the time, not from the third party perspective that we have. Because I will be completely honest that, I'm using 20/20 hindsight when I'm looking at this, and that I have a different perspective than the officer who was discharging his firearm at the time. If he's able to convince the judge and jury that he still had good reason to believe that Mr. Perkins was a threat, then he should be good to go. If he's unable to convince the jury of that, then he's got problems. But incidents like this are very good teaching tools, very good things for us to go over, not only as police officers, but as citizens, to kind of understand how there were multiple people and multiple moments in this one incident that if something had gone differently, we wouldn't have had an unnecessary loss of life. If the police officers had responded appropriately, I believe that the department is going to have a tremendous amount of civil liability. They're going to be paying out millions of dollars in a wrongful death lawsuit because they don't have proper policies and procedures and training set up for their officers to avoid situations like this. But also, as a citizen, you can't come out with a firearm and threaten somebody. There's a lot to this. It's a very good video to watch as a teaching tool. It's a very good case to pay attention to. I, for one, am going to be interested in seeing how this plays out in the future. I think that's it for me today. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.